Hey everybody, Qroo here. Welcome to the channel. You know, one of the ways to improve your Spanish without having to memorize a lot of new vocabulary is to do more with the vocabulary you already know. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on 3 common Spanish verbs, buscar, contar, and dejar, and I'm going to be discussing different ways that you can use them. In other words, I'm looking to boost your Spanish with vocabulary you might already know. Now, whenever I do lessons like these, I inevitably end up discussing different aspects of the Spanish language. So even if you know these verbs really well and you know different ways to use them, you might want to stick around because chances are you still might get something out of this lesson. All right, let's get started. Our first verb is buscar, and it means to look for. ¿Qué haces? What are you doing? Busco las llaves. I'm looking for the keys, or I'm looking for my keys. Or I could say, estoy buscando las llaves. It's important to note here that buscar means to look for. So there's no reason to try to stick in a for. Don't say something like busco por las llaves. Just busco las llaves. As I mentioned in the intro, I end up talking about different aspects of the Spanish language, and I'm going to do that right now. You'll notice that I started that with ¿Qué haces? But I translated it into English as what are you doing? In Spanish, it is common to use the present tense even when something's in progress, where we would use the gerund or the ing ending in English. So what are you doing could be ¿Qué haces? Or ¿Qué estás haciendo? I'll tell you that the first one is more common. Like sometimes I'm at home and I'm in one room and my wife yells from the other room, ¿Qué haces? What are you doing? And I know when she asks that, it's because she wants me to do something else other than what I'm doing. Another way that we use the verb buscar is to pick someone or something up. It's similar to the verb recoger, which means to pick up or to gather in Spanish. ¿Vienes a buscarme? Are you coming to pick me up? ¿Vienes a buscarme? There's another example of us using the gerund or the ing ending in English to translate something that is in the present tense in Spanish. Look at that first verb. Vienes, it comes from the verb venir, to come, and it's in the present tense. With verbs of motion like venir, to come, ir, to go, you really want to avoid using the present progressive. You would never say something like, ¿Estás viniendo a buscarme? Never use that. Just stick to the present tense with those types of verbs. ¿Vienes a buscarme? Are you coming to pick me up? Tengo que buscar a mi hijo en la escuela. I have to pick up my son at school. Now, it's literally saying I have to look for my son at school, but it's not like you're just going to wander around. The meaning here is I'm going to pick up my son at school. Now, I want you to look at that sentence on the screen, and I'm going to give you another sentence and just change it a little bit. Tengo que ir a buscar a mi hijo a la escuela. So in the first sentence, I'm saying I have to go pick up my son at school, and the second one I'm saying I have to go pick up my son at school. Very slight difference, but you'll notice it changed several parts of the sentence. So let's go ahead and address what happened here. So we're using our construction to have to do something, which is our tener plus que plus infinitive. In the first one, it's tengo que buscar, which could be I have to look for something, or as we're using it here, I have to pick up, right? In the second one, tengo que ir, I have to go. Now in the second one, after ir, to go, I have an a and then buscar. Why do I have the letter A in there, or an a? Well, this comes down to know when to pop in certain prepositions, and with verbs of motion, like venir, to come, or ir, to go, if you're going to have another verb after it, you're going to be dropping in an A. Let's look at our sentences again. The next part is exactly the same. Buscar a mi hijo. Why is that a there? It's called the personal a. I've talked about it in other videos. It's because my son, mi hijo, is the object of the sentence. And when we have an object that is a person or referring to a person, we're going to drop in that little a before it, and it's called the personal a. This is where our sentences change a little bit. Look at that first one. I'm picking him up en la escuela. That could be translated as in the school or at the school. But in the second one, I'm a la escuela. So what changed here? Well, it was that verb of motion, ir, that we stuck in there that changed the game. I mean, I could say I have to go to school, right? Tengo que ir a la escuela. And I could move things around and then add at the end, a buscar a mi hijo. I have to go to the school to pick up my son. Well, then the a makes sense, right? Well, in Spanish, we have some flexible word order. So just because it's at the end doesn't mean it's not referring to still having to go to the school. I know that may sound a little difficult. It's actually something that English speakers commonly get wrong, and they'll throw like en la escuela in there instead of a la escuela. but you'll start to hear it if you're listening to the native speakers. That's a nuance of the language. It's a bit more advanced. Don't worry if you don't get that out of this particular lesson. We're going to cover a lot of cool constructions. All right, let's move on. Here's another construction with buscar. Buscar plus the verb, and that's to look to do something or accomplish something. You'll see this a lot in print, like with news articles and things like that. Here's an example from Twitter. AMLO, and that is the president of Mexico, people call him AMLO, busca contratar a 10,000 médicos jubilados para tener un sistema de salud mejor que el de Dinamarca. That's a long sentence, but I just want you to look at the beginning of it. AMLO busca contratar a 10,000 médicos jubilados. AMLO's looking to hire 10,000 retired doctors. It's a pretty easy construction, you just drop it in that affinitive. Here's another example of that construction. El gobierno busca mejorar las calles del municipio. The government is looking to improve the streets of the municipality, right? That's their goal. That's what they're trying to do here. Let's go on to the next verb in our list, and that is contar. It has a lot of different meanings. One of them is to count, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. ¿Sabes contar del 1 al 10 en Maya? Do you know how to count from 1 to 10 in Mayan? No. Another common use of contar, and one I used in my last video, is to tell a story or, recount something to someone. Cuéntame la historia de cómo conseguiste el trabajo. Tell me the story of how you got the job. Let's take a look at that sentence. It starts with cuéntame. If you're not familiar with that particular construction, it is the imperative or the command form. So I'm telling the person, tell me the story. Cuéntame la historia. Now you look, the word I used for story was historia, like history. You may have come across another common word for story, and that is cuento. Although they both mean story, they're not interchangeable. Use historia for things that actually happened, and cuento for like tales, fictitious stories. Cuéntame el cuento de los tres cerditos. Tell me the story of the 3 little pigs. You actually don't have to use either one of those words to use the verb contar in this way. For example, I could say something like, Le conté a María lo que pasó ayer. I told Maria what happened yesterday. If you watched my last 2 videos about direct and indirect object pronouns and redundant lays, that sentence should look very familiar. If that construction looks a little odd to you, like why is there a lay in the beginning of it and things like that, then you should really go and watch those videos. I can't get too far down that rabbit hole in this particular one. I'll make sure I put links to them in the description portion of this video. You can also use the verb contar when you like to tell jokes. Contar chistes. Chistes is plural. To tell a joke, contar un chiste. A Juan le encanta contar chistes. Juan loves to tell jokes. All right, let's move on to a different construction using contar. I really like this one. Contar con alguien. And it's to count on someone, but it literally says to count with someone. Puedes contar conmigo. You can count on me, but literally, you can count with me. ¿Crees que puedes contar con Miguel? Do you think you can count on Miguel? Creo que sí. I believe so. Sometimes it's not a person named right after con. For example, take a look at this sentence. Siempre puedo contar con la ayuda de mi familia. I can always count on the help of my family. I can always rely on it. All right, here's a construction that looks very similar but has a different meaning. Contar con algo. Literally to count with something, but it means to have, like the verb tener in Spanish. El hotel cuenta con más de 200 habitaciones. The hotel has more than 200 rooms. One thing I want to point out in that sentence is 200. It ends with as because it's agreeing with the noun that it's modifying, right? Habitaciones, that's a feminine noun, rooms. 200 habitaciones. We're going to move on to our third and final verb today, and that is dejar. It has a lot of different meanings, but one of them is to leave something behind. ¿Dónde dejaste las llaves? Where did you leave the keys? Las dejé en la cocina. I left them in the kitchen. Now, if you don't understand why the las is in front of the verb on the second one, that's when we're getting into our direct and indirect object pronouns. And again, just did 2 videos about that, so you might want to go watch those. Speaking of object pronouns, you can tweak this construction just a little bit using indirect object pronouns to mean to leave something for someone. Te dejé un sándwich en la nevera. I left you a sandwich in the refrigerator. You're likely to come across different words for sandwich all through the Spanish-speaking world. For example, in Mexico, we use torta a lot, but if you use el sandwich, you're likely to be understood everywhere. We're going to tweak our sentence a little bit in the third person just because, well, that's what we talked about in the last two videos. Le dejé a María un sándwich en la nevera. I left Maria a sandwich in the fridge. Our next usage of the verb dejar is to leave a place, but not like to leave a room, which would be salir, or to like go off somewhere, which would be irse. This is like to leave a place behind, you know, kind of abandon it, move on. It can also mean like possibly to quit something if you're talking about a job or something. María dejó su trabajo. She left her job, meaning she quit her job. María quiere dejar su pueblo y mudarse a Cancún. Maria wants to leave her town and move to Cancún. If you want to say you're moving to a place, mudarse is a great verb for that. Don't use moverse, use mudarse. Our next construction with the verb dejar is going to use the preposition de. So we have dejar, de plus infinitive, and it means to stop doing something. Deberías dejar de fumar. You should stop smoking. You can use this particular construction with the imperative or the command form, telling somebody to stop doing something. We're going to start those with deja. That's for the informal or tú form. If you want to use the formal, usted, you would say deje. I'm kind of an informal guy. We're going to stick with that. Deja de quejarte. Stop complaining. Now, if you're going to do that with usted, the formal, you'd also have to kind of tweak that verb back there, and it would become deje de quejarse. That's for usted. Again, I'm an informal guy. Deja de hacer eso. Stop doing that. This isn't only useful if you want to walk around barking orders at people. You could put it in sentences like this. Nos fuimos cuando dejó de llover. We left, we went off when it stopped raining. Our next use of dejar is a super important one. If you're not already using it in your Spanish, you should be. It'll give it a huge boost. And that is to let or allow someone to do something. I'm actually going to be teaching you two different constructions on how to make these types of sentences. With very short sentences, you'll be able to use dejar with infinitives. This is very common if the object pronoun is like me or te. I'm going to fall back on my imperative or command form now. Déjame hacerlo. Let me do it. Déjame hacerlo. Déjame hablar. Let me speak or talk. Déjame hablar. Siempre te dejo hablar. I always let you speak. That one's not a command, it's just the present tense. Mi jefe siempre me deja salir temprano los viernes. My boss always lets me leave early on Friday. Again, we're just dropping in infinitives or unconjugated verbs. Sorry about the abrupt change in scenery, but Linda wanted me to run the garbage out, so I thought I'd film a little. I'm not going to film too much because it's kind of windy. Even with a little windsock, I think it's going to pick it up. Okay, that construction where you're just dropping in the infinitive with dejar is useful with shorter sentences and things, but it's not the only construction you're going to see like that. The other construction I want to show you today is dejar plus que plus subjunctive. And when I say subjunctive, I mean that verb that comes after que, that first verb, is going to be conjugated in the subjunctive mood. The teachers let the children play outside all day. Los maestros dejan que los niños jueguen afuera todo el día. It's jueguen because it's in the subjunctive mood. The regular present indicative would be juegan with an an. For you folks who don't know what the subjunctive is, I have lots of videos on it. Just think of it this way. You have your present tense, which is really the present indicative, and you have the subjunctive, and they run hand in hand, and the subjunctive has an entirely different set of conjugations. But you really need both to be able to speak Spanish well. That's the Reader's Digest version. Go watch some of my videos on the topic and you'll get a better understanding of it. All right, so back to this construction. We have dejar plus que plus subjunctive. My wife lets the dog sleep in the bed. Mi mujer deja que los perros duerman en la cama. So right in there we have mi mujer, which is also a common way to say my wife. You could say mi esposa. Deja, lets, right? Then we have our que. Boom, that's separating our clauses. In our second clause, we have los perros duerman. That comes from the verb dormir, to sleep, but it is conjugated in the present subjunctive. Duerman, duerman. Let's do one more like that. My friend lets his children do whatever they want. Mi amigo deja que sus hijos hagan lo que quieran. So that one starts the same way. Mi amigo deja que. So our next verb that we come across is going to have to be in the subjunctive, and here it is. Hagan. It comes from the verb hacer, which means to make or to do. Now this next part could be a little tricky. Lo que quieran. Quieran comes from querer, to want, and it is actually in the subjunctive also, but not because this construction. That didn't cause this. In this context, it's like saying whatever they want. Lo que quieran. Our next use of dejar is going to be the pronominal. I'm going to be popping that little se on there. And don't get freaked out by all these grammatical terms. I just kind of throw them out. So when people go, hey, I want to learn more about pronominals, and I can type that in. So what we're going to be looking at is dejarse plus infinitive. And it means to allow oneself to be something. You'll see what I mean in the examples. No te dejes vencer. Don't allow yourself to be defeated. The verb there is conjugated in the imperative, the command form, but the negative imperative, so the word order changes a little bit. I should probably do a video about that. This particular construction is used a lot with don't allow yourself to be something. For example, no te dejes engañar. Don't allow yourself to be deceived. So when you're using it that way, you're going to be starting these with no te dejes all the time and just plugging in infinitives. Now, if you want to specify who you shouldn't be defeated by or who you shouldn't be deceived by, we're going to be using the word por. No te dejes vencer por el miedo. Don't allow yourself to be defeated by fear. No te dejes engañar por los demás. Don't allow yourself to be deceived by others. I think that's a useful construction if you like to write memes or maybe you want to be a motivational speaker. All right, so that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego.